We made it another year. In spite of everything we have been through this year and over the course of our lives, we managed to make it another trip around the sun, to stand humbly before the gates of eternity as they begin to open once again. Wow, that's a lot. What an overwhelming concept. Many of you may now be asking yourselves, how could we possibly be asked to cope with an idea as massive as eternity at a time like this? Who has the time? I have bills to pay. There's brisket in the oven. There's too much to be done. There's too many loose ends, too much to prepare. But you are here. You showed up. You made the conscious decision to return in spite of everything you face in life. Over the course of the next several days, we are reminded through prayer, meditation, and ritual to say all of the I love yous, the I'm sorries, the thank yous, and the goodbyes. Over the next several days, we will have the opportunity to examine ourselves, to examine our lives. I encourage you over these days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to view the legacy of your life as a story where days and months compose the paragraphs which compile our yearly chapters. When I was in 5th grade, my English teacher, Mrs. Fakit, always had us write a 3-sentence summary, a chapter summary, in the blank space at the end of each chapter. It was a great way to quickly thumb through a book and remind us of how far the characters and the story itself had come. Each one of our lives, according to the sages, is a book. And in this book are the moments that make up our complex, vivid, joyous, painful, remarkable lives. Each day, each moment, we pick up a pen and dip into the inkwell of our decisions and write out our story onto eternal parchment. Rosh Hashanah and these 10 days leading up to Yom Kippur are the opportunity to write this year's chapter summary. Should I start again? Okay. Rosh Hashanah and these 10 days leading up to Yom Kippur are the opportunity to write this year's chapter summary. We spend our days toiling and building, wheeling and dealing, learning and earning. And these days of awe, these high holidays, are the prescribed times to look back, seize the day, and choose to be the authors of our own stories. This is the moment when we take an honest inventory by thumbing through the pages of our lives to confront the difficult, remember the happiness, and really delve into what it will mean to improve the story and its main character, you. Recently, my 4-year-old son asked me to see his baby pictures, which is completely ironic because he's still a baby. And furthermore, how can a baby feel nostalgic already? So we started at the beginning. Scrolling through picture after picture, he would giggle and laugh, looking at me, then back at the photos of his seemingly much younger self. And for me, what I saw was immeasurable growth from one frame to the next. I could see the various chapters of Daniel's life unfold from picture to picture. His story, like each of ours, went from a little clump of cells to a walking, talking, pirate-loving miniature person. It's amazing how fast he's growing. And yet, I feel like my story has been the same for quite some time. But in reality, I don't stay the same. While Daniel's growth seems exponential, my growth feels so much more subtle. And it's been this way for years. At a certain point, the growth we experience in life becomes less and less physical and more intangible. As we grow older, change and growth is often hard to discern, especially when days turn into weeks and months into years. This is why Rosh Hashanah is so important, to record these chapter summaries, to record how far you, the main character, have come. Last Saturday at Torah study, we were reflecting on Rosh Hashanah and the preparation necessary leading up to this moment. Looking back over the past year, we were beginning to write this year's chapter summary. And it occurred to us in our discussion that time is such a fickle thing. Sometimes time flies by, and other times it just seems to drag on. I mentioned at some point in this discussion that I've been exercising a lot more lately. It's awful. I really don't like it. And I feel the fickle nature of time with each ride on my stationary bike. In the middle of each ride, I find myself begging for the ride to be over. I'm bored. I'm sore. I'm tired. And I find myself wanting time to go faster. I find myself wanting time to pass me by. And then it occurs to me how tragic this thought is. I am wishing, hoping, that our most prized and fleeting commodity be taken from me faster. Who thinks that? Why would I wish that for myself? In some sense, the pain and suffering of exercise is an investment. Just think of all the time I will have gained by only losing 1 hour to that stationary bike. But suffering, generally speaking, is not an investment. Yet suffering is an inevitable part of life, an inevitable part of our stories. While I was working at a hospital in Los Angeles in their student chaplaincy program, I saw a lot of suffering there, far greater suffering than the opportunity to ride a stationary bike. The suffering I saw there was immeasurable. One of the core tenets of Buddhism is that suffering is inevitable. And we really don't have a concept like this in Judaism. So I was more than eager to learn about the Buddhist understanding of suffering when I found out there was a Buddhist monk named Mugu also working as a chaplain at the hospital. We became fast friends. We spent our lunches together talking about Buddhism and Judaism, comparing and contrasting the two. She asked me if I had ever heard of Jubus, Jews who practice Buddhism. And one day I asked her about the Buddhist understanding of suffering. What does it mean that suffering is inevitable, I asked. And she raised her hand like this. And she said, life is a series of highs and lows. Sometimes there are great highs, and sometimes there are deep lows. Suffering, she said, is the change between them. This simple hand motion has shifted the way I see life. Mugu explained to me that life is a series of ups and downs, that there are chapters of our lives that are exciting and joyous, and chapters that are arduous and hard. It's the ebb and flow of things that is the experience of suffering. Wishing that things were as they were an hour ago, or years ago for that matter. Wishing that things were as they were. This is suffering. Suffering, she said, is universal. And most importantly, suffering need not be compared. Each person suffers in their own way, their own highs and their own lows. Each person has their own book of life. Each person's suffering is as real and legitimate as the next person. Suffering need not be compared. Our stories need not be compared. But, Mugu said, through meditation and mindfulness, we can begin to alleviate the immediacy of suffering. She explained that these peaks and troughs can be viewed in smaller and smaller segments. Yes, of course, if we look at life as a giant arc, suffering may appear great. But if we zoom in and focus on the peace of the here and now, focus on the moment at hand, the delta between bliss and pain becomes less and less. The suffering can become more manageable. And so today, I'm going to take Mugu's advice to heart. In 5784, I'm going to break up the suffering with more awareness and mindfulness. I'm going to break up my suffering into smaller, more manageable moments. In 5784, I'm going to check in with myself. And I want to check in with you too. Because if we can acknowledge that each of us experience this ebb and flow of life, then we must acknowledge the deep responsibility we have to one another. We each have our own stories, but perhaps we can find a way to bind our stories together, to lift us up in light and love, to live life to the fullest. This is what I hope for each of you. To begin this new year with hope and with strength. To focus this year on tzedakah, which is to acknowledge and respond to the immediate needs of others, because each of us have needs, and this can only strengthen our community. A year of gimilut chasadim, acts of loving kindness beyond the call of duty, because loving kindness beyond the call of duty is exactly what the world needs right now. And a year dedicated to Torah, our sacred story, because within it is our shared story of experience, strength, and hope. Shana Tova.